Growing your recruitment business shouldn't mean working longer hours. The truth is, if you're stuck, it's not because you need to work harder. It's because something in your business isn't working efficiently. The 7-Figure Freedom Scorecard is a free 10-minute assessment that gives you instant clarity on what's working in your business, what's slowing you down, and the next steps to build a 7-figure recruitment firm without the stress. Your personalized report will break down the 6 key areas of growth and show you exactly where you need to focus to increase revenue while working smarter and not harder. Get your custom score now at recruitmentcoach.com/scorecard.
If you look at modern recruiters today, a lot of the craft has been lost. I see recruiting, even from a purely delivery perspective, even if you don't do any BD, is a sales function. I don't think many companies see it that way anymore. They might separate, we need to do sales to win recruiting work, but they don't see the recruitment process as a sales function, which I think it fundamentally is.
In 2021, Harrison Wright launched his crypto recruitment firm and built nearly $400,000 in his first 6 months.
I was selling retainers and closing retainers, even though I hadn't recruited for years and I didn't work in a retained firm before. In that 6-month period of the latter half of 2021, it went from zero to $400,000 in 6 months.
Then in 2022, the crypto market crashed.
Then the market crashed in 2022, as it does cyclically. It's a very reliable 4-year cycle. And that was a humbling experience because, it had been so abundant, I had need to optimize various things. So
hiring froze overnight. For 6 months, he had no searches. Meanwhile, Harrison's burning $30,000 a month just to keep the business afloat.
It's a very different mindset, and I just lacked a lot of business sense back then. I don't even know how I did this, but my monthly expenses were racked up to $35 grand a month at one point.
I'm Mark Whitby, and you're listening to the Resilient Recruiter podcast. My guest today is one of our clients, Harrison Wright. He's the founder of the Blockchain Recruiter, one of the original search firms specializing in crypto and Web3 talent.
The crypto industry is a weird place because a lot of the things that people will teach you to do traditionally for recruitment don't work in crypto.
Harrison rebuilt his business during the bear market and doubled down on positioning, retained partnerships, and exceptional delivery.
And I'll be open with people about what we're not as well. We're not the quickest. If you want resumes in your inbox tomorrow, we're not the people for you. These are the problems we solve. Do these problems resonate with you? If we've done our job right, and what I'll hear quite often is, never had a recruitment experience like this before.
Today, he runs searches with an interview placement ratio just over 2-to-1, and he's built a fully retained practice in a market that's dominated by contingency recruiting. Plus, he's won clients worth more than $350,000 in lifetime value through inbound alone.
If I look at my positioning now, it's unique. This might change, but at the moment, I feel like I shouldn't be sharing this in a podcast. I'm giving away the source to people that might listen, but there's no other recruiter that specializes in institutional crypto. I'm the only one.
In this episode, you'll hear how Harrison rebuilt his business after the crash, why he believes that delivery and client experience matter more than client acquisition, and how positioning and craftsmanship can transform a recruiting firm. Harrison, so good to see you.
Mark, it's great to see you as well. How have you been?
Fantastic. It's been, I say fantastic. There's been ups and downs. It's been a while since we caught up, actually. So right now I'm up. So last year was a different story. Last year was rough. But listen, man, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast. You're someone I've wanted to have on the show for a long time because I like the way you think, and you're doing some really interesting things that we'll get into, but thank you.
Mark, I appreciate you having me on. I'm a big fan of the show, as you know, so it's really great to be here.
All right. So I always ask the short version of how did you get into recruiting?
That's would you believe that's nearly a 20-year-old story now? That's kind of scary. One day you're 23 and then the next you're 40. It really is like kidding. That. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I remember when I was at school, I've signed up. I applied to do either psychology or aerospace engineering at university, which you couldn't get two more different things. And the aerospace engineering came from I wanted to be a fighter pilot, but eyesight, epilepsy, so that was out. And I was thinking about it, I don't want to do engineering. I'm not a maths guy. Why am I applying for that? And so long story short is I don't know what I want to do. I don't see the point in going to university. I'm just going to interact with the world and see what happens. Do you remember? I don't even know. I mean, it's a long time since I lived in the UK. Are high street agencies a thing anymore, or are they dead now?
Yep. No, that's a thing for sure. So high street, for people don't outside the UK, is like Main Street is basically what it means. And so a high street agency is essentially like um, a will have a shop front, right? So it's not like a boutique search firm. It's like they have a storefront on Main Street. That's the analogy, I guess, right?
Yeah, and you just walk in and you talk to the recruiter, and so that's what I did. So okay, let's do some temp jobs. And I remember I go into this place, and it's ridiculous of the entry level job market, right? There's this job doing the filing or the typing or whatever. Oh, we're really looking for someone with 2 years experience. Well, if I had 2 years experience, I wouldn't be talking to you to do a
Yeah,
£6 an
yeah,
hour typing job,
exactly.
would I? And I did this typing. I was like, no, I'm not leaving here until you give me a job. And I was like, I'll do your typing test. Oh, wow, you type really fast. Yes, you do. So I started doing all these, random temp jobs, filing and this and that and the other. Telemarketing was an early one as well, which naturally led into recruiting. And I realized, this job actually seems quite interesting. Maybe working at a recruitment agency would be cool. And then, I'm the kind of, I like to go into rabbit holes and things. So I bought the Steve Finkel books, and I was like, this is fascinating. I was obsessed with this craft of recruiting. So that was it was a conscious choice for me. It wasn't, I know a lot of people fall into it by accident. That wasn't the case for me. And so I managed to get a job at this recruitment agency to recruit telemarketers in London back in 2007. And I had to interview at about 15 different places because before anyone would hire me, like, oh, you're not salesy enough for us. No, oh yeah. And I remember I met with Robert Half in Watford, and the guy sat down with me after the interview. Is this big, like 6'5", bald guy? Is like, you're a nice guy. You won't be nice after working here anymore. You should think about that. So that's
That's
right, Robert Half.
that's a bit of an indictment of his own business. But so how old were you when you got your first recruiting job?
I would have been, I can't remember. I would have been about 20, I think. And I
Okay.
actually, this was a bit of a full start because I made it 3 months there. They had very high expectations. There had no sort of capacity to train, and I put in tons of effort, but I think I was just too immature for the job at the time. So they fired me, although with great they were sad to do so, but they then placed me in a bunch of telemarketing jobs, ironically, because that's what they did. And so I did that, and I ended up moving down to Exeter, which is a whole other story. But then a couple of years later, I got back into recruitment, and this time I joined a boutique firm that did industrial automation recruitment, and it was, in some sense, it was a really good firm to join because they were very process oriented. So if I bring them the Steve Finkel book, great. Whereas I remember at the firm I was at for 3 months, it was everything the opposite of what I'd learned about the craft of recruiting. Is, hey, do you remember Monster.com?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we'd basically spend the mornings, hey, I know you have 6 agencies already. We could be number 7. Put us on the list. And the
Right.
afternoons, you
Oh dear.
pressing F5, refreshing for new CVs. Oh, let's jump on this guy before someone else does. And I remember I saw this one company, they listed all their staff on their website and they had their direct dial numbers. So I just started picking up the phone. And my boss was like, why are you doing that? So why wouldn't I call the what I didn't know that how to headhunt people properly, though, so it didn't work. But it was just crazy to me. The only way they got candidates was from job boards. Whereas at the new firm I joined, it was back in the days before we had LinkedIn, we used to have what we called a blast sheet. So we'd map out the companies we were going to target. We'd call it the switchboards. Hey, who's your sales guy for the Southeast? Do you have a mobile number? And then we call them back. And so I learned all of that. So I was there 3.5 years before I moved on, and so that was a really good foundational place to work.
It's interesting that your first jobs were in telemarketing. I feel like that is a good, like sales in general, like learning, whether it's telephone sales or sales skills, is a really important, skill set to have in any job, but especially if you're going to start your own business. And, you know, so I think that, I don't know, what do you think? Did that give you anything that you've taken forward into, business?
Yeah, I think if you look at modern recruiters today, a lot of the craft has been lost. So we always used to, even on the delivery side, I see recruiting even from a purely delivery perspective, even if you don't do any BD, is a sales function. I don't think many companies see it that way anymore. They might separate. Oh, we need to do sales to win recruiting work, but they don't see the recruitment process as a sales function, which I think it fundamentally is. And I think there used to be a lot of emphasis on skill development. I mean, if you take a modern example, have you seen Steve Finkel's new book?
No, I've read his old one.
It's great. He's got a new book. It's called Closing for Recruiters, and it's about two things. The first half of the book is about the follow up after first interview, and the second half of the book is about closing the offer. The book is about nothing else, and there's over 150 pages just on the debrief with the candidate to increase the percentage of offer acceptance. I mean, that's the kind of craft that we used to focus on back before LinkedIn.
All right, this is something I want to talk to you about because I know you have really emphasized the craft of recruiting and the candidate and the client experience in your business. So let's fast forward and talk about the blockchain recruiter, right? Because that's your baby, and you've done some really cool and innovative, if I could say that word, innovative things there. So craft recruiting, you posted on LinkedIn, I think it was a couple of months ago now, that you have an insanely high offer to acceptance ratio. I don't remember exactly what it is. You can tell me what it is. And you got so much flack from recruiters who didn't believe you. And I thought that was so interesting that the industry just accepts that it's normal that, a lot of your offers won't be accepted, and which that to me is a sign. Now, obviously, we are dealing with human beings, and you can't control what other people decide to do. So there's always going to be an element of uncertainty there. But to just accept it and not try and maximize your conversion, that just seems like completely wrong to me. So can you remind me what your offer to acceptance ratio is? And then how does that fit into the bigger picture of how you manage your recruiting process?
Yeah, so it's crazy the amount of flack I got for that post. I think it went up to over 30,000 impressions with all the flame wars I was getting. Just a little aside, I saw a post from Dan Anzu not too long ago, and I was, wow, maybe I need to get even better. But she claimed something like global top billers, as she described them, will place 85 to 90% of the candidates they submit. And that's an extreme ratio even for me. So I'm thinking, what am I missing here? I need to get better at that. But I didn't quote a specific percentage in that. What I said was that I hadn't had an offer turned down in 3.5 years. The irony is, since I made that post, I've had 3 turndowns, and that was too much.
Oh,
So I'm never ever going to make a post like that ever again. I angered the recruitment gods. But it is an extremely rare thing. I mean, this recent run was a little different, but the last time that happened was it was in 2022, and this was right as the crypto market was crashing, and I had these offers out, although they were in the process of being generated, and right as the bear market happened, there was a change of management, and they reduced the. So if you join a crypto company, you generally get a token allocation, which is like equity but in tokens, and they reduced the value of those packages by 80%. So sorry, I'm not taking a job anymore. So that was that. But it's very rare.
Although, if they really believed in crypto, surely that would be the perfect time to join, right? Because then it's going to, go way up.
Yeah, you would think so. It's ironic because the market's involved in such a way now with the volatility that it's an easier sell to get someone to join a company that doesn't have a token now, which is very different from how it used to be. But if I think about these ratios, the other thing I got flamed for on that post was it came up in conversation. I said, our interview to placement ratio is 2.16 to 1. And this guy just didn't believe me. I was like, what's your submission to interview ratio? Well, sometimes it can go as high as 2 to 1, but usually it's 1 to 1. Oh, no, that can't be possible. It is possible. And
that's right. So 2.16 to 1 interview, that's first time interview to placement. So in other words, for every just over 2 candidates that you arrange an interview for, they're getting a job.
Yeah,
which is fantastic. So can you tell me more about your philosophy and your process? Because this is something that you write about a lot on LinkedIn. I know from our previous conversations, it's something that you really care about.
Yeah. So my philosophy is to streamline and automate the things that don't matter to make more time for the things that do. So I'll give you an example. And this is a whole nother thing. I don't think it's worth us getting super into detail on, but I made a kind of an acquisition this year. Not in a traditional sense, but someone I know was shutting down his company, so I inherited his accounts and some of his team, and there's a sort of rev share agreement behind that. So they're a very classical retained firm, quite old school. So that company structure, they had 3 desk researchers, 1 recruiter, and the owner. So I took one of their desk researchers and the recruiter. I didn't take the other 2. And I remember when they first came on board, and I was going through some of my process with them, which would be, generally speaking, on the delivery side, we have the initial call with the candidate. After the outreach, let's say there's a cold call, that wouldn't count. Then we book the first call. That might go for 30 to 60 minutes. Then we'll send them things, let them reflect on it. We'll have another sort of 30 to 60 minute call with them to tie up the details. Then something fairly unique that I do is we do the first interview for our clients. So we do a 90-minute session that's based on Lou Adler's performance-based hiring. And we go through...
It's based on what?
Lou Adler, his performance-based hiring methodology?
Yeah. He's been on the show.
Has he? Oh, I have to check that out. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So it's not the full implementation of Lou Adler because it just wouldn't work in an agency context, but it's like a cut down version of that. So when we send the candidate over, they don't just get the resume; they get 8 or 9 pages of specific notes tailored to the job description, which we also write custom clips and things like that and scoring. The immediate reaction from the team is, we can't possibly have the time to do all of that. But yes, you can. You don't have the time to do it now because you're sending individual LinkedIn emails manually and then following up manually over and all these manual processes. So
hold on, pause for a second. That first interview for the client, does the client sit in on that and you're just driving the meeting, or what you're saying is your interview process effectively replaces the client's first interview because is that which of those is it?
It's more like that. Yeah. We typically spend more time with the candidate than the client does before they get hired by quite a margin.
Wow. How many? So 3 conversations, 3 or 4 hours before they get to the client?
And then there's the interview prep, which is an hour.
This is really interesting. So wait, they have to go through 3 rounds with you before the client interviews them, plus the interview prep, which is an hour.
Yep.
Interesting.
People think, that I get surprisingly a little pushback on it. People actually tend to appreciate that it's thorough, especially when I tell them, well, statistically, you have a 50% chance of getting hired once you actually get to meet them. So, this is worth doing. But what the really fascinating thing is, we were talking about this the other day. So even though we have there's 3 of us instead of 5 in the old setup, they estimate our delivery capacity is about 3.5 times what it was when they worked for the other firm.
Wow.
With less people and all this thoroughness, because all the outreach is streamlined. There's no reason to do that manually. We have the automation set up and it goes, and then we spend the time where it actually matters.
All right, we're definitely going to come on to the automation and the AI and the outreach and the marketing, which you're brilliant at. But I just want to really squeeze the juice out of this conversation about delivery, because you've really taken it to another level. Is there any other components to the 2-to-1 interview to placement ratio?
Yeah. So are you familiar? Did you ever read Spin Selling by Neil Rackham?
Yes. Love it.
So I love it as well. If anyone listening doesn't know, it's kind of the foundational book that led to all of the solution selling methodologies like Challenger and so on. So I base my recruitment process on spin selling. Something I sort of, years ago, I kind of adapted it myself. Most recruitment companies, I'll teach you, pitch the job, then get into qualification. I do it the other way around. I don't pitch the job. I try and avoid even our outreach messages saying anything about the job if I can. If they haven't replied by, say, number 4 or 5, then we'll pitch the job to get those people that wouldn't respond. But generally, we want to get them ideally on a call with on a discovery basis. So you run a discovery call like you would with the client.
This is awesome. I want to learn about that. So I've got a friend, I've not spoken to him for a long time, but he's a recruitment trainer who also has a search firm, which he may be retired now, but maybe not. So I don't want to retire him if he hasn't. His name's Paul Syker. He's in the DC area. And I had him speak to my clients once, and he had this method which he called the unfocused recruiting call. And what he meant by that was he didn't pitch a job on the first call. He made it all about what are their career goals? What would appeal to them? Like, why are they even talking to him? Why were they receptive to, taking a call from a recruiter? And he was just pulling out all this information. Um, Even if he did have a job in mind for them, he would never, ever pitch it in that first meeting. He would always then call them back later and say, I've been thinking about our last conversation and how you said that this and this and this were important. And I have something that I'd like to present to you. And then that's when he would pitch the job. So it was always the opposite of what most recruiters end up doing. And his rationale was, otherwise you're just shooting in the dark. You really don't know. Well, first of all, it's backwards because you don't know if the candidate is the right one to present to the client anyway. But secondly, you don't really know what's important to them or what they're going to respond to. Listen, having a ChatGPT license for your team is great, but it is not enough. ChatGPT requires you to stop what you're doing, switch windows, copy information, and ask it to do something. AI agents are different. They're built into your workflow and they take action automatically. Recruiter Flow is an AI-first ATS and CRM with built-in AI agents working for you around the clock. Their encoding agent structures your data. Their job change alert agent monitors your database for opportunities. Their note-taking agent captures conversations and updates your CRM. This isn't about working harder. It's about letting AI handle the busy work so you can focus on relationships. To see it in action, go to recruitmentcoach.com/recruiterflow.
Exactly. Yeah, I personally, I don't tend to separate those calls, but I can see the rationale in doing it. I think it's the same principle. And the other thing is, if you pitch somebody a job and they're interested in the job, everything you then hear from that point on is going to be prejudiced information because they want the job. Whereas if you're asking them about their motivations before there's a job on the line, you're going to get a more honest answer. So what I'm looking for is, to me, I think people tend to over-focus on, hey, is this person good at what they do? And they under-focus on, are they actually going to take the job? And what other competition are we up against? Because what I want to hear is that this is the job for the person. So I'm just, oh, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, I'll check it out. And also, because of the way we're approaching things, and I think if you just pitch jobs on LinkedIn message like everyone else does, people call that headhunting, but the reality is a lot of the time what you're going to get is people that are looking for a job. Just say, hey, I know we haven't spoken, but this is exactly the right time for us to talk because you're in a strong position. Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk. So then, if we uncover, it's like in the spin selling methodology. Sometimes you can lead someone to a conclusion, and they realize, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way, but now that I think about it, yeah, it doesn't make sense for me to stay here. I should think about this. And then you identify all of their concerns, and you realize, okay, these three concerns match the positives of what we're recruiting for. So we present them in that way. Or if they don't, we say, we don't recruit them, right? So everyone we recruit is intentionally because it matches this is going to improve their situation in a very notable way. So that makes it stickier. And then generally these people aren't interviewing elsewhere. So in crypto, I saw that post or a similar post I mentioned as a report, and it found that crypto companies that recruit with agencies have a 50% offer acceptance rate. I was like, that's diabolically bad. But it makes sense because all the people they're targeting are interviewing at 3 or 4 other places if they're any good. So statistically, what are your chances? I would rather get the person that is not looking yet and place them. And so that's one of the other reasons that the odds are so high.
Harrison, the thesis of spin selling is that fundamentally you can't persuade someone to do something. All you can do is ask them the right questions and then they persuade themselves. That's kind of like the thesis of the whole book. I'm interested though because I'd say 80% of recruiters, their outreach is pitching jobs, and then 20% they're pitching the conversation, right? And where they're saying, look, I'm an expert in this field and I'd like to get to know you. And I don't have a job for you at this moment in time, but I can certainly give you a feel for what the market's doing, benchmark your comp plan. And then we know each other in case we can help each other in the future. That's the kind of gist of it. But what's your What does that sound like when it's in a LinkedIn or an email from you guys?
So depends on the type of audience. If it's the really crypto native, like, you know, anonymous type people that we often used to recruit before the market went upstream. I send a lot of memes. So one of my favorites is, do you know the midwit meme?
No, what's that?
So you've got like the IQ bell curve, and the thing of the meme is that the low IQ and the high IQ person generally believe the same thing, which is correct, and the one in the middle has the wrong take about it. It's
Okay.
so you wouldn't
What did you
send
call it?
the midwit meme.
Midwit. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So like an example would be like the left and the right curve would be, oh, I need to set up 10,000 different automations and do this, and then plug in my and then the middle one, the middle. Oh no, sorry, that would be the middle one, and then the low and the high would be just make the calls. So that's the simple, obvious conclusion. But so there are these various memes that crypto. A lot of it lives on Twitter, so the big meme culture. So with that sort of audience, you send a meme, and so I use a variant of that where it's like the middle one says, "Oh, go away, leave me alone, I'm busy," and then the bottom one will say, "Email good," and then the top one will say that as well. And I've had some people come back to, "Okay, yeah, fine, that's a good point. We'll talk."
So wait. So you're including a meme in the outreach?
Yeah, usually later on in the sequence. I wouldn't lead with it because some people get bristly about that stuff, right? But if they're not get back to you anyway, you might as well go in there. But the early messages will usually be things like, "Is it a good time to talk to a headhunter?" Or if we're in a bear market, like we're coming into now in crypto, will be something like, "Hey, lots of chaos in the markets right now. Maybe a good time to consider your options." Or if the market's good, it'll be, "I know everything's going really great right now. That puts you in a really strong position to evaluate opportunities objectively. We should talk." And then a bit later on, I'll pitch the job just to capture the people that wouldn't respond to that kind of outreach. And then usually I'll put depending on the audience, I'll put a meme. If it's a more professional type audience, I generally won't put a meme. So that's a judgment thing.
All right, awesome. So I'm sorry, I veered the conversation into outreach, but coming back to your principles around recruiting and why your ratios are so good, were there any other elements that that you haven't shared?
I think it really comes down to wanting to account for all the variables up front. I find the usual approach is to backload all this stuff. I'd rather front load it. So what would you remember the old saying? If in doubt, send them out. When I worked
Right,
for
yeah. I never
yeah,
subscribed to that.
same. Working for big UK agencies, the focus is always how many CVs are we sending out, how many interviews are we booking, and I look at it the opposite way. Like we had a guy recently, and there's one client that we do a lot of work for at the moment where they're a management consulting firm, and so we're recruiting people out of industry to work in consulting, which is very attractive, but it also carries a lot more transition risks than the typical thing because it's a complete career path switch with a different. So it often excites people, but then it can be harder to close them. So we had a guy recently say, "Hey, I'm completely happy where I am. Couldn't identify any concerns with the job, but so this is a 10 out of 10 opportunity. It ticks this box, this box, this box. Like I was not looking for something like that, but I'm really interested in this." I'm thinking, I'm a little wary that we're going to take this guy through the processes and say, actually, no. So I literally grilled him for an hour on, what if this happens? What if that happens? Okay, what if this sounds great, but they offer you $200,000 to stay? What are you going to do? And I kept grilling him, and okay, I'm satisfied with what he's, and then he followed up with me email. "Hey, I really appreciate you being thorough on this. I'm very interested in this. I'm very dead serious about this." So I was like, okay, we'll take him forward then. Whereas, you ever heard of the phrase happy ears?
No.
I used to be a victim. Well, not victim. I used to do this when I was younger, but happy ears is where the salesperson hears what he wants to hear and ignores what he doesn't. I was
Oh,
like, oh,
happy ears. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I get it. Hearing, you're right. Yeah, hearing what we want to hear and not following up on any potentially like reading between the lines and picking up on anything that might contradict that we should put this person forward.
yeah. So, I mean, in a typical search, and the numbers will vary depending on what it is, but the typical search will aim to target about 150 people per opening. So, my point, rather than try and make this fit, is, oh, I'd rather, okay, let's find another candidate that does fit and is going to accept the job, and we'll make sure it's locked in. So, all those sort of, I want to iron those out before we submit them, not halfway through the process or when there's an offer at stake.
Right. And so this just closes the loop because this is more or less the conversation we had on LinkedIn. When you posted that about your acceptance rate and people didn't believe it, then really what it means is you're qualifying people out earlier in the process. And so by the time you make the offer, you already have pre-closed them. You already know that they're going to say yes, right? And you should not be making offers to candidates unless you already are confident that they're going to accept. But you've already laid the groundwork for that, like all the way through the process, but front loading, as you say. So, yeah, it makes total sense. Um, let's talk about the market you're in because, like, well, first of all, why did you decide to be a crypto recruiter or Web3 recruiter, blockchain recruiter, whatever? I know these terminologies mean different things and overlap, aren't identical. Um, what attracted you to that? And then what's that journey been like? Because you mentioned volatility earlier, and I know it's been not always plain sailing.
Yeah, it's been a ride. So I used to live in Malta, and at the time, I actually got out of recruiting for about 2.5, 3 years, and I was doing B2B sales. And I tell you, even doing big deals with Fortune 100 companies is amazing how easy that is compared to recruiting. So,
Really, that
yeah,
surprises me. Okay.
well, yeah, it's so much more straightforward. You just have to make one case to one set. There's not this. Um, but I did that for a while. Partly that was because I wanted to move to Malta. And back then it was not easy to get remote jobs. This was what, 2016 ish. Um, you know, I had a business before that in the life science industry recruiting that I set up with our old boss. Never do that. It's a bad idea. And for various reasons, it didn't go according to plan. But that was when I was getting into content marketing and these sort of inbound methods right when that was early. And I set up this whole webinar and summit series. And I invited all these life science marketers to talk at the summit, and I positioned myself in the middle of the summit, and that was great. Um, and this one guy is like, they sold webinars, right? And he's like, "Hey, how do you feel about coming to work for us?" So, but then everything, and I was planning this move, and at that time I'd gone deep down the marketing rabbit hole, right, and the inbound and content things. I was like, what's the worst that can happen? Like this business isn't going to pan out. This partnership, um, and I want a remote job, and I'm really obsessed with the marketing stuff right now. So why not? So I sold life science marketing for that period of time, and that was great. I think I learned a lot more from doing that than I would have learned by spending 2.5 years more in recruiting that I could then apply to recruiting, right? And branding and positioning and those sorts of things. So it was very valuable, But while I was there, I thought, okay, I don't want to have this job forever. I want to work for myself. So, okay, what am I going to do? Meanwhile, there's a lot of crypto people in Malta, and this was quite early days. I remember I looked at it, I thought, well, maybe I could combine this crypto thing that I know about with recruiting. I bet there's not many people in the world that are more qualified to do that than me. And at the first time I looked at it around 2017, I quickly came to the conclusion the industry's a little bit too early for this. It's not quite there yet. It's too small to support a commercial function. But I sort of kept tabs on it. And then 2019, I looked at it again. There was this guy, he's quite famous in the industry now, but he set up this crypto consultancy in Malta, and I just rang him up. I was like, hey, I've got this idea. Can I come and talk to you about it? He's like, yeah, sure. But do you think there's a demand for this? Yeah, I do, definitely. We have this setting up, and they're hiring this, and someone's, okay, cool. So I started building it, and you know what UK salaries are like. I didn't have a lot of money back then, so I built my own website, even though it took me about 40 hours probably to build my WordPress website. I got all the messaging, and I did a photo shoot and stuff like that for the professional pictures. And so I was just sort of slowly building it while I was doing my remote job. And then the crypto market went crazy. I'm sure everyone remembers, even if they're not into crypto, a few years ago, the obsession. And
when was this, Harrison?
21.
Okay, 2021. Yeah.
And I had the good fortune to be well positioned. I got the domain theblockchainrecruiter.com off GoDaddy auctions for $99.
Oh, fantastic.
So I'd laid out all the messaging really well, right? Probably too well. If I have a weakness, is that I tend to overanalyze things, as you probably pick up on already. But yep. But I just started getting flooded with inbound leads with no effort whatsoever. We're hiring this, we're hiring that. Soon enough, I was selling retainers and closing retainers, even though I hadn't recruited for years and I didn't work in a retained firm before. And that in that 6-month period of like the latter half of 2021, it went from zero to like $400,000 in 6 months. And me at the time with zero expenses, living in a tax haven, having worked a UK job with a UK equivalent salary, more money than I know what to do with. This is crazy. And that was really great. Then the market crashed in 2022, as it does cyclically. It's a very reliable 4-year cycle. And that was a humbling experience because it had been so abundant. I had need to optimize various things. So when I actually look back at it later, we only won maybe 1 in 8 of our retained pitches, but there was so much coming in, and the fees were so high, it didn't matter. So I didn't care to pay attention to it. And I was only planning to be a solo recruiter, but we got so busy, and I had this key client that was hiring a lot. So okay, I guess I should build a team. I was a bit haphazard about it. Didn't build the right team. The team was entirely delivery focused. I didn't have a workable sales process because everything being so abundant, right? So the market turned. I was a lot less business savvy back then. You know how, I'm sure you see this with your clients, where there's a difference between being a recruiter that has their own business and being a business owner that does recruiting.
100%. Yes. Yeah. That's our thesis. That's what we're trying to do, is help people who are, recruiters, who are good billers, and help them become true business owners. That's a kind of premise, really.
Exactly. And I think, now I would say I'm a business owner that does recruiting. I could be a business owner that does any kind of professional. I could run a marketing agency or an AI automations agency or management consulting firm or something like that. I like recruiting. I'd love to. I don't. But fundamentally, if you ask me, do I want to be a recruiter for somebody else, or be an in-house talent person, or would I rather run a marketing agency? I'd run a marketing agency. And it's a very different mindset, and I just lacked a lot of business sense back then. So I don't even know how I did this, but my monthly expenses were racked up to like 30, 35 grand a month at one point. And then the market fell out. Key clients stopped hiring. I didn't have a workable sales process. No one was hiring. We went 6 months without any revenue. I didn't want to fire my team or cut because I would be nice. So, and the crazy thing about it was, we had this market boom in 2021. I had, a lot of clients paid us in their own tokens back then. And sometimes I had the good fortune, like client paid the invoice in their own token. 3 days later, the token 10x'd. So, oh, great. So I had a large amount of money in Bitcoin and Ethereum. It was pushing $1 million at one point. And I remember December 2021, I had a phone call with the first guy I placed in crypto. He said, it was a bit of a veteran. Market's crashing. I'm selling everything back to fiat. You should do the same. Like, yeah, whatever. It comes so easily. You take it for granted, right? It's just numbers on the screen. It didn't really feel real. So, market's declining, lost 80% of its value in my holdings. Then I ended up selling everything at the bottom of the market to keep the company afloat.
Oh, no.
Yep.
Oh, so, Harrison, that's a kick in the balls.
I mean, if I wanted to, I'd be retired by now if I hadn't done that. Just that one decision. So, and then the next few years, we kind of, it was plateaued really. I mean, 2022 was really hard, and then it sort of picked back up a bit again. We got through by having really strong positioning and really high quality and things like that. Not to the extent that I have now. It's been a process of building. But the last, say, between 22 and last year, we were averaging 300,000 to 400,000 a year. Not amazing, but fine. And I was solo for most of that time. I only built a team again recently, like in this last 6 months.
Which, by the way, Harrison, for perspective, that is still what I would consider a top biller, like $400K a year. Most people aspire to do that. So that's, that is no small potatoes.
That's comforting. The interesting thing is it feels like a lot less money than it did in 2021 with how inflation's gone. It felt like infinite money back then, not anymore. But even living in Mexico. But what was the other thing I was going to mention? Yeah, so what I spent that time really working on leveling everything up. And BD was certainly a part of that. But I don't want to go on too many tangents here. I'm wary of getting muddled with what I'm talking about. But the crypto industry is a weird place because a lot of the things that people will teach you to do traditionally for recruitment don't work in crypto. Because say things about the crypto industry. Well, people live on Twitter and Telegram. They don't live on LinkedIn. That's changing as the industry grows up. But for that period of time, there are people that talk about crypto on LinkedIn, but they're not our clients. They're not, the founders aren't on there. They might have a profile, but they never look at it. They'll tweet 40 times a day, but you won't see them on LinkedIn. They don't answer their email. Everything goes through Telegram. And it's a very cliquey network-driven industry, right? So it all revolves around conferences and events and knowing people. So the traditional sort of cold outreach stuff just doesn't work very well.
Okay, that's interesting.
I tried to implement all these things that people teach and you teach, and in that space, they just did not work. So I guess I need to become a Twitter personality, which is a lot more time-consuming and difficult than becoming popular on LinkedIn. I'll tell you, events and all this stuff. And so that was a bit of a struggle. And I think my retained process-driven methodology was also a bit mismatched to that industry, because if you look at the most successful recruiting firm in crypto, they literally do the opposite. And I position myself exactly against them, by the way, even by studying it. But it's like, they hoard candidates. They call themselves a talent agency, and it's the common. Other firms have adopted this now, and it's basically the embassy model on steroids. Hey, come to us, and we'll send you people from our database, and they'll just. It's a complete opposite of the process-driven approach. So I didn't realize this until recently, but I was always trying to find that tiny minority of the market that really, and the types of like founders that really value what I do, because most of they're young, they want speed. I'd have conversations all the time. We need a CMO and a COO. Okay, we need them in 3 weeks. How's that going to work? So that I can't promise you that. This is an 8 to 10 week process. So there was this subset of the market that really valued that, and that's what we worked with and I identified. But one other thing that I realized over this time when I started looking at things more closely was I had this thing where we'd win a client, we'd do a great job for them, they'd agree it was a great job, and then they wouldn't come back. And they would use us on some really rare occasion, but then they'd go back to their contingency agencies or in-house talent or whatever. So why is that happening? And eventually I realized the reason it happens is if you're selling an ultra premium service, it's not enough to get the job done. You have to make the experience feel amazing as well. So then I started adding these little touches, like we just do the work and then deliver the result, and that was it, right? But I started adding little touches like weekly reports. So I either do it, depends on the client, I either do it as a PDF or we do it live in a Google Sheet. So I'll track all of the weekly activity in there. So this is how many people we've identified. This contact. These were the results of those calls. Not interested for this reason, that reason, that reason. And I'll track the ratios. So this is our engagement to recruitment ratio, and this is what it tells us. So we do a weekly review meeting when we go through that. And with some clients, I actually just put everything on a Google Sheet, right? So we have all the prospects on there. Then we mark them as we contact them and the results, so they can just check it in real time where we're at with the search. And then on our review meetings, I'll prepare for those. Okay, this is what this is telling us. This is what we might need to adjust, and so on. And even down to things like, when a candidate takes the job, we'll send them a gift in the mail and a like a card and things like that. And oh wow, you really went the extra mile. We'll make sure it's tailored. So just all those client experience things. And since I've done that, we almost never lose a client. So
wow. Most recruiters compete on speed and fees. Trusted advisors compete on trust. And trust is rarely built on the sales call itself. It's built beforehand through familiarity. Familiarity is when prospects feel like they already know you, even if you've never spoken before. They've seen you share insights on the market. They've heard your perspective, and they've seen evidence of your expertise and your experience. Consistent video content does exactly that. It builds trust in advance. Clients understand the value before the first conversation. And instead of shopping around and you having to pitch against 3 other firms, they come to the call already confident in you. That's exactly what Trusted Voice Video is designed to do. It helps you move out of the commodity zone and gives you expert status by keeping you visible, credible, and familiar week after week without you having to become a full-time content creator. This is exactly how I use video myself. It's produced by my colleague Sanjay, whose work you're already familiar with because he produces the podcast you're listening to right now, plus my LinkedIn videos. If you want to build trust with your clients before you ever speak to them, book a free content strategy call at recruitmentcoach.com/video. That is huge. Really interesting. I love how you've you called that optimization, is analyzing, where there's holes in your bucket essentially, and how do we plug those to, and if you do that across multiple systems in your business, there's a huge compounding effect from that, right? But Harrison, what I'd love to talk about is positioning and like inbound marketing in general, because you're great at that as well. But it was interesting that you said you were very clear on the sorts of engagements you wanted and what you didn't want. And so even if your way of working appealed to a minority of the market, that's quite a bold thing to do, to say, okay, here's the business we want, and we don't want the rest of that stuff. You have to be very clear in your mind of like how you want to be positioned, what you stand for, what you stand against. And so can you talk about marketing, inbound marketing, how you generate inbound leads, but maybe starting with the idea of positioning?
Yeah, it's a broad topic. The bit of it's kind of connected to this, but I think closes a loop to mention before we get fully into that. So the biggest unlock has actually been combining all these things with a shift in the market. So this last year, crypto is going mainstream. Not the traditional crypto industry that people think of with tokens and so on, is that's not in a good way. But say the infrastructure behind crypto, banks are implementing stablecoins for payments now. And so all this technology that people have developed in crypto is getting implemented in the traditional financial system. So last year I was looking at we're staring down another crypto bear market, right? Which happens every 4 years like clockwork. And I knew this was coming, which you've probably seen the news last week. It's here. I was thinking, okay, I don't want to go through that again. What am I going to do? And I had two options. I was either we could become an AI recruitment company, or I could add AI. That could work. I thought, we could also look at institutional crypto. So banks that are adopting crypto, companies that are selling into banks and institutions, and it's like fintech meets crypto. And so I did a bunch of digging on it and a lot of research. Actually, I realized, okay, I could do AI. The advantage of AI would be it probably has a higher ceiling. It's a much bigger market. All the money and investments going there. Whereas what would be the ideal sort of business that would work in AI? It'd probably be a high turnover, exclusive contingency or engaged, volume. I look at institutional crypto, I was like, okay, that's a much smaller market. It's a high-end market. It's a high-fee market. It's a very... There's only maybe 100 companies that are relevant to me at any one time right now. I'm sure that will expand, but okay, these are professional people. The institutions, they probably value a very process-driven methodology like works for me, and it's more cerebral, versus the AI companies that want fast and scrappy. I'd be dealing with, professional New York people, not San Francisco startup people, which is more my vibe. I can do both. But so let's do, and I already have the knowledge in this area. And I also thought, well, most of the crypto recruiters are probably not going to be successful working with institutional clients because they just don't have the right temperament or approach to, work with institutions. I'm perfectly positioned to cover that little niche. So I kind of pivoted in that direction. And that's been a big unlock because they need exactly what we have. And what I find with, say, we've always worked with early stage startups in the past, because say you have a big company that's native to what they do, but large startup, they don't use a lot of agencies because they have internal talent teams that know that field, right? So I've looked at this, like my institutional market covers some of the famous crypto companies now, like say Circle. I'm sure you probably even know Circle.
Yeah.
They very rarely use any outside help, most of those companies, because they have hundreds of internal recruiters that know crypto. But a bank or a consulting firm, they have tens of thousands of employees and a small crypto digital assets team. The internal recruitment team doesn't know anything about that. So that's actually a great niche because we get the stability of a larger company that hires regularly and values process, but they also need our help on a recurring basis. So, I mean, just one of the clients we're in conversations with will probably land in a couple of months, asset management firm. They're probably going to have 5 to 10 senior hires this year. So that's, at least $400,000 revenue in that one client alone.
Awesome.
Like that's just a forward pipeline. I mean, it's early in the year, but we're on track, I'd say, this year to do something between 1.2 and 1.6 million.
Wow.
So like quadruple what we were doing. And the only difference has been getting a client type that recurringly hires and values what we do, versus the problem with the startups is, even when you find the ones that value what you do, I mean, half of my old clients are out of business now. That's just the nature of the market. So and I think my temperament is more suited to winning and expanding a client over a lengthy period of time. So each new client win is an exponential lift, right? Whereas before it was just the churn.
Harrison, this is quite a nuanced point, and I hope people are getting this, that like you finding or identifying the segment of the market which is going to be a good fit for you called it a temperament, but like your way of working, and where what you offer is a match for what they value. So that's super smart. What was the process that you went through to kind of make that realization?
Um, yeah, I can't. I'm not sure I can even remember where it came from. I just had this sense of I don't want to deal with another crypto bear market, so I'm going to start looking at alternatives. And I realized, this is interesting. This pivot, because banks are going to adopt these rails for payments and everything else, regardless of what happens to the Bitcoin price. So it's resilient in that sense. The entire time leading up to this point, how busy we are would depend on the Bitcoin price. But now the market's in the tanks, but we're busier than we've ever been. We've literally got 9 open retained searches right now.
So what you're describing is what I call a strategic pivot. So the alternative you're considering is, do we shift like to AI, which is kind of adjacent, but not really the same market at all? Or is there part of the blockchain, universe where the demand will continue to increase, that's not correlated with the price of Bitcoin, right? And so that question unlocks this whole new opportunity for you. But what I'd encourage our listeners to do is think within whatever you specialize in, have you really thought this through? Like, what is the overall trend within your market? How is it being impacted by AI? And what is the strategic pivot that you could make, which would allow you to, 4x your growth, even if 80% of your market is either flat or even potentially contracting, right? It's that rather than, and this comes back to happier, what we were talking about earlier. I think there's a tendency not to want to think about bad stuff, right? We want to believe that how things are, going now is just going to continue. But that might not be true, right? We can't assume that I had a great year this year, so next year is going to be great as well, and be thinking ahead and looking for those kind of opportunities that, without completely changing industry, would allow you to continue to be relevant going forward. So anyway, sorry for the long speech. Coming back to your business, congratulations. I'm really thrilled for you, Harrison, that you've made that pivot. You've got 8 or 9 retained searches currently. You're looking to quadruple your billings in 2026. So how does that lead into the conversation about positioning and inbound marketing?
That's right. Yeah. So the reason I wanted to close that loop is, if I look at my positioning now, it's unique. This might change, but at the moment, I feel like I shouldn't be sharing this in a podcast. I'm giving away the source to people that might listen, but there's no other recruiter that specializes in institutional crypto. I'm the only one.
But also, Harrison, you have such a head start. It would take to recreate what you've built that you've already described in terms of like your process and your client and candidate experience and everything, as well as the credentials that you've established over doing this for 4 or 5 years now. You have a massive head start. So I feel like you're safe.
I think there's two distinct but related points I want to make here. One is, from the perspective of positioning, I think a lot of people they don't think too much about the product. I do recruiting, let's go make some calls. But I look at this as, the product is leverage, right? The sales activity is a linear thing. The more you how would I word this? So the more leverage you have in the product and the offer and the match between those things in the market, then the more effective your sales activity is going to be. So, and it's the same on the recruiting side, right? So, let's say, average fee 50,000. It's trending up, so it might be higher than this, but let's assume 50,000, right? So with our interview to placement ratio, to make 1.6 million, let me just do some quick maths here. By 50, that's 32 placements in a year. So we only need to set up 69 interviews a year to make 1.6 million, which is 1.44 interviews a week. So if you have leverage, you don't need huge volumes, right? And it's the same on the BD side. It's like, I'm working on some things with Claude Code to streamline, check out some of the AI, the pace of development here is mind blowing to streamline some of this. But right now, honestly, I've been so busy the last couple of months that I haven't had time to post on LinkedIn or do much BD or anything like that at all. We're overwhelmed. But I just look for little opportunities here or there because the position is so strong. Like I was interviewing a candidate recently, and he was going through in this detailed session about this integration he did with a company that's right at the top of my target accounts list. So after the interview, I was like, hey, it's a little bit cheeky, but do you know these people well enough to make an intro? Made an intro. Our position is really strong. So, it doesn't take much activity to generate a really strong opportunity because we've positioned ourselves to be the obvious choice. Because if they go looking at, okay, well, what else could we do? They're not going to come up with much. So I find if you look at that, the success that we're having has been on a much longer time horizon than some people would like. Everyone wants things to happen now. I'm going to make all these calls. And I guess I'm not that good at making things happen now. Some people are. Some people will start their business. Like, I did $1 million in year one. Well, that was never me. But what I have done
not
is
many people actually. Here's the reality, Harrison, is that typically things always take longer than we would like. That's like as a rule of thumb. If I want to make X amount of money by Y time frame, then it's actually going to take 3 times longer than that. Is been my experience. I don't think it's just you. I think that's I think that's normal. So, how did you position yourself as the obvious choice in your market?
The original market or this new institutional one?
Well, I guess the same principles would apply, right?
Yeah. So it'll probably be more useful to talk about my process from early on. So what I did in the beginning, and a few years ago, there weren't many crypto recruiting firms. There were a handful. Now there's hundreds. But
sure.
I did deep research on the market. I did deep research on all the competitors, looked at what are they selling, what's their likely ability to deliver it. So there's one firm, for example, they did really well. The founder's now exited and he's retired in his 30s, which is great. But he started up about the same time as me. So okay, and I remember researching his firm. He already had this huge Twitter audience in crypto, like 70,000 people, and he had this YouTube channel that was really popular for crypto, and he used that to launch his firm. But he had barely any recruiting experience. And I think he'd worked in-house talent or something like that for a period of time. And he'd been an account executive for a software company. So I thought, okay, he's going to beat me on audience, but he's not going to beat me on process and delivery, right? So I was looking at what is everyone offering? What are the gaps? And I built something that lived in the gaps across a bunch of axes. So even down to logo and color scheme. So everyone likes to use blue and white and or red. So okay, I'm going to be yellow. That's unique. And even things like I did a bunch of keyword research. So I called it the blockchain recruiter. If I was starting a company today, I wouldn't call it that because people talk about blockchain less than they talk about crypto now. But back then, on Google Trends, people spoke a lot more about blockchain than crypto. So okay, that's what I went with. And then over time, what I've done is you interact with the world, you start refining it. So when I built my first website, a lot of it didn't really feel like me because I was trying to find things to write for the positioning because without any sort of market experience hand to hand. And then over time, I was like, okay, now I know more. Actually, I go back and revise the copy and tighten it up and make it more like me. And I look at it pretty repeatedly. What's the market looking like now? Where's the gap that we're living in? So I find, it's taken a bit of time, but this positioning pivot to the institutional side has done way more for me than any amount of cold calls could ever accomplish. And so, I could probably get more into the details, but hopefully that's a useful sort of high level overview.
Yeah, no, that's good to understand your way of thinking about it. And then, but what does that look like on a practical basis in terms of like the sales and marketing tactics and activities that have moved the needle for you in terms of driving, new meetings? Especially, what's I think impressive with you is you do get inbound opportunities, which most recruitment businesses don't.
We get a lot of referrals now as well. I've had, I think, in the last couple of months, 5 introductions that I didn't ask for to new clients. Um,
Wow, that's
these are
nice.
some of these are major clients. There would be, because when I look at a client acquisition, I look for clients, not jobs, right? So if you chase jobs, you might get one job. If you contingency, you might not even fill it, and that's it. But I'm looking at, if we're landing the right kinds of clients and positioning for those, then each client is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars because they're going to be hiring repeatedly as long as we keep doing a good job. Um, so how does that look? For me, it's about the client experience from the buying process as well. So, I mean, I could talk about the tactics to generate leads, but I think what's more interesting is the positioning you get when you have those conversations. So, if you have a client has a new conversation with a recruiter, they're usually expecting to, what's the job? What's the salary? Oh, here's our fee agreement, blah, 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 blah. They're not expecting, okay, we need to talk for an hour about the company and then we'll book a second meeting to talk about the role and we'll have the fit. And actually, I should talk to this guy because he has an insight on this and that'll help us scope this out. So you get that experience of thoroughness right from the beginning. And then I'll send, when we get to the point of actually making the proposal, I'll put together a proposal using a proposal software that'll go through about 10 different sections covering our understanding of the company, our understanding of the business problems. So I approach it almost like from a management consulting view. It's not this is what we'll do to fill the job. It's these are the stakes of the company. These are the problems that you have. These are the value of these problems. This is how we propose to solve those problems. And I'll be open with people about what we're not as well. We're not the quickest. If you want resumes in your inbox tomorrow, we're not the people for you. These are the problems we solve. Do these problems resonate with you? Yeah, they do. If we've done our job right, and what I'll hear quite often is, never had a recruitment experience like this before. So it's essentially polarizing. If there's people that aren't a good fit, then fine. I'm not going to try and convince them. We want to land. We want to identify and hone in and put all the effort into people that are a good fit.
Love it. This is awesome. But then now I've seen you doing a lot of things and I'm curious like which of those has paid off. So I know you wrote a book, you've done webinars, you've done video sales letters. Um you're doing a lot of interesting things like marketing things. Um which of those has been worthwhile for you?
Oh, the book. I that was a you want to talk about mistakes? That was a catalog of errors because I put all this effort into writing the book and no effort whatsoever into thinking about how to market the book. Um,
Okay.
so I think I've had about 7 people literally buy my book ever. Honestly, but you know
But
what?
but here's the thing, the purpose for a business owner, the purpose of writing a book isn't to sell copies, um, it's to give you authority, right? So even if you give the book to your prospects, then I assume that was the play, not to try and sell a lot of copies.
Funnily enough, the biggest lever, the biggest impact that's had for me is to actually find my voice because the normal way to produce a business book is you produce content and then you use the content to make a book. I did it the other way around. I created the book, and then I used that to inform my content. Because I remember when you and I first started work together way back when. I didn't want to post on social media, as you remember. I was like, no, I don't want to make LinkedIn posts. Um, I know I don't want to make videos, and then both of them turned out to be great vehicles. But ironically, I think the thing that's been most useful is not any of those. It's been behind the scenes. So, have you noticed that the really high end like retainer firms, you don't really see them online at all most of the time. They don't
The
have any
Shrek
kind of online
firms.
presence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or not even just the Shrek firms, but the boutiques as well. And
Okay.
I thought that was a bug, but I realized over time it's almost a feature, not a bug, because it's not that having an online presence and that overt marketing isn't helpful, but at the higher level you're dealing with, the more, the less your prospects are sitting there reading LinkedIn, the more they care about trusted networks. So actually it becomes much more of a relationship game. So if I was running a firm that was doing, say, $20,000 fee placements that happen to scale, I'd be all over the internet. I'd be NPCs every day. I'd be churning out massive amounts of activity and videos and content, and that would be my focus. But we're dealing in, we're going to hire an executive team for our first ever digital assets build out. People don't do that. They care about, hey, I asked my advisor, who does he trust? So I'm focusing much more on building out trusted networks, and it goes back to the delivery and client experience, right? Because that amazing experience is reducing my BD workload because it produces referrals and intros, and it's a flywheel because I keep the clients that I win, and they're still hiring. So and what I'm going to start doing this year, and I've been a bit slack on all things face to face, mainly because I dislike traveling, but I'm going to put a huge amount of effort into that this year. So I'm going to be good thing about this institutional market is half of it's in New York City, so I can just go back to the same place. But I'm going to set up things like private dinners and that I'll tack onto conferences, and I'll go to these events, and then people get invited to the dinners. And at some point, if I have the bandwidth, I mean, this is a bigger firm thing maybe, but I'm thinking of some sort of invite-only community for C-level people in the space that will meet quarterly or something like that. So all those things, I think, when you do a high-end business, have much more leverage than sort of blanketing the internet in content. Not that can't be helpful too.
This is awesome, Harrison. Community, I think, is an underutilized strategy, and in-person experiences in particular. We actually did. I don't think it was during the time we were working together, so I'll see if I can send you a link for it. We did a panel discussion with a selection of our members who are hosting in-person events like small roundtables and that kind of stuff. Some are doing bigger events as well, like where it's more like a conference that they're hosting. So it was a range of different things, but I do think that is an extremely powerful way to grow your business, is through like the power of those networks.
My addition to that I would caution everyone who runs a recruitment business to think about is, if you've ever played around with AI tools. I mean, a couple of years ago, ChatGPT is interesting toy. But these, I'd say we're about a year away, maybe even less, from being able to completely automate sourcing and outreach and that sort of top of funnel side of the business to the top end extent of what a person could do. So there's going to be no differentiation in that anymore, or any of the things that recruitment companies normally sell on. People will be able to do this themselves in-house if they want easily. The differentiation is going to be in relationships, craftsmanship, influence,
trust.
Exactly. And probably if you look at what any of these kinds of technologies do, they usually automate the bottom end of the market, commoditize the middle, and they turbocharge the high end. So that was another reason I decided on this market, is because, if anything is going to be automated and sort of streamlined and commoditized, executive search at the high level is going to be the last to go. Nobody's going to trust AI to hire them a new CEO.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I think retained search is much more insulated from AI and automation than the middle of the market, for sure. And to your point, yes, having the authority, the relationships, and the trust is going to allow you to stand out in a sea of automation. Absolutely. Now, having said that, you are big into automation. What are you doing in that side with your business at the moment?
Yeah, so my principle is very heavily automate the candidate top of funnel and some light touch BD things, but not the high touch important BD things. So our workflow that we have at the moment on the delivery side, it's taken a few months to get it running smoothly with the team, but now it's up and running. It's amazing. So I've had you've had Pre-Soccer on the show twice, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
No, he's only been on once, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I took a lot of inspiration from that episode around how his delivery system is set up. And I think he described it as a relay race, if I remember rightly.
Okay.
So ours is set up kind of similarly. So what that looks like is, let's say we get a search. I'll do all the intake and all the sort of high touch stuff. Speaking of automation, so I write these performance profiles, which are performance based job descriptions that Lou Adler would teach. Now, before AI, I used to spend hours writing. Sometimes it might take me all afternoon. I think I'm a really good writer, but it takes me a long time and I don't enjoy it. So especially technical kind of writing. Same with proposals and things like that. So, one thing that used to be the case is it would be up and down. It's like, oh yes, that sales call went really well. Oh, now I have to write the proposal. It'll be, oh, that intake went really well. Now I have to write the job description. That was usually how it went. So now I have a Claude project set up. I have a repository of all the performance profiles I've ever written. And now I can drop in the transcript from the meeting and I can drop in, whatever other materials are relevant. And it will create one that is 90% of the way there. Like, sometimes I might not even need to it's that good. And it looks like exactly like I wrote it. And sometimes it picks out things that I would have missed. So that's one automation there. So then I'll brief the team. Researcher will go and build the list. They do that usually looking through, Recruiter Lite, and if it's a technical role, maybe trawling GitHub and so on. But they're coming out with a list of profiles. I then manually review that. I'd rather spend an hour reviewing the profiles than an hour or multiple hours talking to people that don't fit because we didn't control the quality on the front end enough.
Okay, well that's true. On the other hand, I would have thought there's a development path for the recruiter where they are able to recognize the perfect profiles without you having to do that part.
Yeah, well, I think we could get there. I was just on a meta level, my philosophy with this is I'm thinking about, the problem I find with service companies, especially recruitment, is, it's an altruism that the bigger the company, the worse the service tends to be. And the problem is, how do you scale my maintaining the quality? So what I've landed on is, at least for now, I have oversight of everything. There's nothing I just hand off to somebody else. That, oh, you deal with this client. But what I'm doing is I'm delegating progressively the most time-consuming, lowest value tasks, and then keeping ownership of everything else so we keep the quality tight, but also leverage my time. So, I might spend an hour reviewing a profile list. So I will usually approve about 50% of the profiles. They then deal with the outreach. So that goes in. We use Talon at the moment for LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, I've heard of
automation.
Talon. Yeah,
I like Talon. It's good. So that that goes out. Then my recruiter will do all the initial calls with the candidates. So she'll talk to there'll be calls booked to a week. She's got amazing judgment as to who's a good fit and who isn't. I don't think I've ever disagreed with her. So she'll bring me the finalists. The two of us will meet them together again, and it's kind of a handoff. And then we go through that 90-minute interview. I've started where my recruiter does those 90-minute interviews too, so I might offload those eventually completely. If it's a C-level candidate, I'll usually take the first calls, again for quality control and because they could be clients as well.
Exactly.
But I would say, so there's still a lot of delivery stuff I do because I'm still running all the deal making. But we leverage my time about 3x. When I was solo recruiter, even though we weren't, when I was solo, I wasn't doing anything like the kind of detail we are now with the 90-minute interviews and the reporting and the performance profiles and so on. My max capacity was maybe 2 or 3 searches. I mean, now we're hitting 9 and we're very busy, but it's manageable. I could probably squeeze 10. I'd rather not have this many at once, but we can do it. And that's a much better scaling model than hire a bunch of full desk recruiters that have no quality control and burn through clients and so on, right? So going back to automation, we use it for the top of funnel there. Then I do some really light touch, like BD networking automation. That's just simply, I have in Talon, we have our market mapped out. So I have our ICP segmented by company type and then by client or candidate. So I just have the automation going, 50 connection requests a week. And it just sends one message like after they connect, hey, it's great to meet you. I can't remember exactly what it says, but it's along the lines of, hey, let me know if there's anything I can do to be of help. And that generates a certain number of conversations. And then I take them from there. And then I've been too busy to post content lately, but I'm working on fixing that with some of the other stuff with Claude Code. So the ideal plan there, which I think is the same as you would advocate, is I'm posting the content to LinkedIn, connection requests, I'm seeing the content, engaging with it, and then I'm building a funnel around that. So there's a light touch sort of low lift automation there. But then, the main BD motion is more strategic. It's whale hunting really, and I don't automate any of that. Although I'm just starting to go down the Claude Code rabbit hole now. So the next thing I want to build is an intelligence engine that will monitor our entire ICP, monitor our key accounts for reasons to reach out, remind. Basically, it's one of the things I found really helpful is, how there's a big psychological difference between work that comes to you that you have to finish and work you have to create. I think one of the underrated reasons recruiting is so difficult is because it's a game where you have to make all your own work.
Yeah.
So, there's not just a set of tasks to do. You have to go and physically make it happen. And what
There's
this
also
delivery
a
system...
perverse, it's like almost approach avoidance, because it's like, I obviously want to increase my billings, but in order for me to do that, I need to do more work, right? And so it's like, I'm going to do all this work to win a client, and then I've just won myself the opportunity to do even more work. It's kind of like, I don't know if that's what you mean, but
Yeah, it kind of is like, if I come in and I have 6 hours of meetings booked in my diary, it doesn't take me any psychological effort to show up for those meetings. It might be tiring. Like the other day, I literally had 8 hours of meetings back to back, and I was exhausted. But it was you just show up and do the meetings, right? It's automatic by this point. But when you then you get off those meetings, you've got to make some BD activity happen. That's a much psychologically harder thing to do. So what this delivery engine has done for me is it's changed the situation from where I had to go and do the work to where the work comes to me. So now I've done the briefing, I hand it over, and then calls get booked to my diary. People come to me that we should talk to this guy. So then it's more of a CEO role, right, where you're handling the things that people are bringing to you. So what I want to do with this intelligence engine is do the same thing for BD, where the system will tell me, okay, there's 5 actions for you to do today that are really important. This target account, this happened. This target account, that happened. Here's the message I suggest you send. I was like, okay, boom. So then it's giving me what I want. What I want this to get to is a point where I'm not having to make work happen anymore in any capacity. It's just the work is coming to me. I execute it to the best of my ability, and things happen.
So this is something you're building now, or it's something that's on your project list?
Well, it's kind of building now. So I've just built the content machine, and I haven't tested it yet. This is literally yesterday.
Okay.
So I'm going to make sure that works, and then but I've got it's probably going to take 3 to 6 months, I'm guessing. But yeah, I've got a plan to build out like a business operating system across everything. And I think we're coming to the point where maybe, I don't know if you want to go down this rabbit hole, but with the way the technology is going, I think for example, CRMs, we will not need CRMs in a traditional sense anymore. I don't know about you. I've not liked any single CRM that I've ever had. They all have a huge downside to them. I mean, actually, I do like Atlas. Atlas is great, but it still has its downsides in that you can only interact with it in a way that Atlas wants you to. But so Atlas are bringing out an open API soon. So my plan there is once they do that, I can connect it with my operating system in Claude Code. So now Claude will have access to all of my conversations, and I can pull those and use them for whatever I want. So you won't need to actually look at a CRM to do anything. Because if I want it to tell me what I need to do each day, I just need to go to the chat. Like, hey, what are my priority actions for today? And it'll pull it from the CRM. I don't need to look at the CRM. Or I can just feed things back to the chat. It's like, hey, I thought this candidate wasn't particularly great. Let me know how I should approach this next. And I'll update that, and I'll go query the CRM again, or things like that. It's a mind blowing set of possibilities.
So you're talking about Claude Code, but and this what did you call it? Business operating system? But it sounds almost like an AI assistant who's just telling you what to do and when to do it. Is that basically
Pretty much.
it? Or
I don't know if this is just me, but I get something I really struggle with is decision fatigue. So,
yes,
especially strategic business development, where you're thinking about, you're not just bashing out volume, but you got your target accounts and you're planning out actions. You spend most of your time thinking and not doing. So, what I want this intelligence engine to do for me is to do most of the thinking, and so it's based on my parameters, right? I know what the playbook looks like and what we should do in certain situations and what to monitor for. So it's going to do that and then just feed me the actions, and I just have to do them.
all right. So after this call, I'm going to send you a link. My colleague, did you meet Rebecca Hastings? Maybe
I didn't meet her, but I think I've listened to an episode of hers.
Okay, great. So she has built that basically, not using Claude AI, but she's built an AI supported sales system, which essentially removes the decision fatigue, because she's mapped out the entire playbook, all the different types of workflows that are involved in business development, which parts can be safely and credibly automated, and which parts require a phone call, a personal email, a video, or what have you. But the system will tell her who she needs to reach out today and suggest like, here's an email, here's a video script or whatever, based on her brand voice, her ICP, the particular client in question, and whichever workflow it's pulling from. It's really cool. Anyway, we're helping some of our clients to build that. So I'll send you the details in case you're interested.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah, so it sounds like that's my my school of thought on that is I think people generally try to automate the wrong things. They look for the lazy option. Oh, let's automate. Let's have automatic leads. It just doesn't work that way. It needs to be you, but what you can automate is the context.
So listen, we are way over time. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for longer. I think this is one of our longest ever episodes, but I think partly we haven't caught up for so long, and you're doing really interesting things, man. I've been admiring like what I'm seeing, which is only probably the tip of the iceberg on LinkedIn. But this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Harrison.
Mark, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks again for having me.
All right. Talk to you again soon. Before we wrap up, here are my 3 biggest takeaways from this conversation with Harrison. First, treat recruiting as a sales process. You'll notice Harrison doesn't start by pitching the job. He starts with a discovery conversation, just like you'd have with a client. Understand the candidate's motivations before presenting any opportunity. Second, qualify candidates deeply before you submit them. Harrison often has multiple conversations with candidates before they ever meet the client. By the time someone reaches the interview stage, there's already strong alignment. That's how he maintains an interview placement ratio of 2-to-1. And number 3, position yourself where your approach is actually going to be valued. Harrison realized his retained high-touch process wasn't right for the typical crypto startup. So instead, he refocused his marketing on institutional clients who value process and long-term partnerships. The result is fewer clients, deeper relationships, and much higher lifetime value. Now I'd love to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from this episode? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to the Resilient Recruiter podcast and share this episode with a recruiter who wants to build a more resilient business. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.